Good evening, my sleepy friend. Tonight, we'll drift quietly back in time to an age of olive trees and sun-warmed stone, to sandals worn thin on dusty roads, and meals that may or may not involve salted fish heads. Dim the lights, settle into your favorite blanket, let your body melt into rest, and if this journey helps you relax, feel free to like and subscribe, only if it feels right. Now, close your eyes and follow me through the winding streets of ancient civilization where the myths were mighty, but the plumbing was not. Let's begin. Now, I know what you're thinking. Ancient Greece, philosophers, marble statues, togas flowing in the breeze. It all sounds quite romantic, doesn't it? A quiet life in Athens or maybe Sparta, sipping watered wine beneath an olive tree, debating the meaning of justice with Socrates himself. But let me tell you, my dear sleepy traveler, if you were suddenly transported to ancient Greece, chances are you'd be begging to come back before your first lunch break. Let's start gently, shall we? Imagine waking up on a rough straw mattress, not a spring in sight, just dried reeds and the occasional crunch of something unidentifiable beneath you. The air smells faintly of smoke and olives. And not the nice kind of smoke, either. More like the someone's been burning goat dung kind. You stretch. But stretching in 432 BCE is a dangerous game. There's no hot shower waiting, no fresh robe, just the same wool tunic you wore yesterday. And the day before, well, you get the idea. Your feet hit the floor. It's cold. Stone cold, literally. You shuffle toward the door, and you're immediately greeted by a neighborhood goat licking a clay pot. No one seems to own the goat. He's just part of the community now. Breakfast? Well, if you're lucky, someone left out a bit of barley porridge. It's thick, cold, and sticks to the back of your throat like philosophical regret. You glance around. No spoons, of course. You use a shard of broken pottery to scoop it up. It tastes like sadness and yesterday's fire ash, but it fills the belly. Outside, the sun is already blazing. No sunglasses, no sunscreen. Just you and the full Mediterranean burn. Your sandals, made of leather and hope, barely protect your feet from the heated cobblestones. Now let's say you're in Athens. A man bumps into you in the agora, the public square, and starts shouting about honor. You're confused. He's confused. Suddenly there's a crowd, because in ancient Greece, public arguments are practically a spectator sport. You back away politely, or try to, but stepping backwards, you trip over a pile of amphorae filled with olive oil. A merchant screams. A child laughs. Somewhere, a philosopher mumbles something about destiny. And it's not even noon. But perhaps you decide, bravely, to carry on. You're curious about this world, after all. So you make your way to the local gymnasium. Not for lifting weights, no. The Greek gymnasiums are for discussion, and everyone's naked. It's a bit alarming. You try to sit quietly. But a man with a long beard and no sense of personal space begins to ask you about the nature of the soul. You nod, smile, say, a lot. Eventually, he quotes Plato. You quote, something you half remember from high school. He's unimpressed. To escape, you slip out and head toward the market. You're craving something sweet. Maybe a fig, a date. Unfortunately, figs are pricey today. So you settle for a handful of boiled chickpeas from a street vendor who looks suspiciously like he hasn't boiled water in weeks. They crunch more than they should. You find a shady spot near the temple. Sit. Exhale. A little bird hops nearby. It feels like peace. Then the festival begins. Suddenly a group of flute players appears, followed by dancers, followed by a man dressed as a goat. You've wandered into a Dionysian parade. There's wine. So much wine. Someone offers you a clay cup. You sip. It's warm, sour, and oddly fizzy. You try not to make a face. You fail. A nearby priest chants something about fertility. You decide this is a good time to leave. Back home, if you can call it that. The house is dim and smoky. Your roommate is grinding grain with a large stone. You offer to help. After 3 minutes, your arms feel like wet noodles. Ancient Greek arms, you realize, were built different. Dinner is more barley. Some olives? A single dried anchovy. You chew slowly. Very slowly. As the sun sets, the streets fill with chatter, gossip, and the occasional sound of a man reciting poetry to a tree. You close the shutters and lie back on your straw bed. Your back aches. Your sandals are broken. Your soul is philosophically exhausted. And yet, there's a charm here, a simplicity, a rhythm to the day. No phones, no rush. Just life. A little rough, a little itchy, but full of stories. Still, if someone offered you a soft mattress and a modern toilet, you'd take it in a heartbeat. And now, as the fire dims in that quiet Athenian home, let's wander somewhere new. Let me take you by the hand now, gently, and we'll drift forward through the centuries, through dust and time, until we find ourselves somewhere new. It's warmer here, drier. The roads feel more worn, more structured. You can almost hear the clatter of carts and the calls of merchants echoing down the stone-paved streets. You are in Rome now, ancient Rome, a place of empire, of marble, of sandals, togas, and jobs. Yes, jobs. You see, as grand as Rome may appear in paintings and statues, beneath the polished bronze and the gleam of laurel wreaths was a workforce doing things that, quite frankly, you probably wouldn't put on your resume. Let's start with one of the more aromatic professions, the fuller. Now, you may be wondering, what's a fuller? Well, imagine a laundromat, but with more urine. Fullers were in charge of cleaning togas, tunics, and all manner of cloth. Since detergent hadn't been invented yet, the Romans turned to the next best thing, ammonia. And where does one find ammonia? That's right, human urine. There were public collection pots on street corners, and citizens were encouraged, with a small tax break, mind you, to contribute their liquid gold. Fullers would collect it, mix it with water, and then stomp on clothes in giant vats, much like you might imagine grapes being stomped into wine, only less delicious. So imagine that. Barefoot, ankle deep, stomping away, surrounded by the scent of last night's dinners and overhydration. A noble profession? Debatable. A necessary one? Absolutely. And if you're thinking, well, at least that was indoors, I invite you to consider the job of the vomitorium attendant. Now, first, let's clear something up. Contrary to popular myth, a vomitorium wasn't a room where people went to throw up mid-banquet. It was actually the architectural term for an exit passage in amphitheaters where the crowds would vomit out into the streets. Poetic, right? But that doesn't mean there wasn't vomiting at banquets. Oh, there was. The Romans were known for their epic feasts, with tables laden with peacock tongues, honeyed dormice, and mystery meat pâté. Overeating was common, and so a certain kind of servant was often stationed nearby, holding a bowl, just in case. You can imagine the training for such a job. Hold the bowl steady, make no eye contact, pretend this is perfectly normal. And it was, for them. Another favorite job, or rather a least favorite, was the ornatrix, or hairdresser. Now, in a time before shampoo and gentle detangling sprays, styling a Roman matron's hair could be a multi-hour ordeal. They wanted curls, braids, buns stacked like little monuments. But hair was washed maybe once a week, if that, and lice were common. The ornatrix would have to comb, oil, perfume, and pin the hair into shape, all while enduring the occasional slap, critique, or poetic insult. The wealthy Roman ladies did not mince words. There's a Latin proverb, comae sui servus est, which loosely means he is a slave to his own hair. But the real slaves were the ones styling it. Now, if none of that appeals to you, perhaps you'd be better suited for a career in gladiator maintenance. Oh yes, gladiators didn't just show up in the arena shiny and scarred. They needed prepping, oiled muscles, sharpened weapons, and cleaned armor. There were men, sometimes boys, whose only job was to polish breastplates, strap on sandals, and carry buckets of water and sand for cleanup. The sand, by the way, wasn't just for decoration. It soaked up the messes left behind after a fight, and someone had to rake it smooth afterward, like preparing a Zen garden, a very loud, slightly terrifying Zen garden. But let's not forget the street sweepers. Not glamorous, no, but oh, the things they saw. Rome's streets were alive, with animals, merchants, children, drama, and filth. People tossed everything out of windows, food scraps, broken pottery, the occasional mystery liquid. Street sweepers had long-handled scrapers and bundles of twigs tied into brooms. Every morning, they'd shuffle along, muttering to themselves, waving at neighborhood goats, and clearing a path for the well-to-do in their polished sandals. Then there were the aqueduct divers. Sounds adventurous, doesn't it? In reality, these were the poor souls sent to crawl into the city's massive aqueducts, which brought fresh water from distant mountains and scrape off the limescale, moss, and gunk that built up along the stone channels. Tight spaces, damp walls, little light, and the occasional rat the size of a papyrus scroll. Not exactly a dreamy career, unless your dreams are oddly specific. Still, one of the strangest jobs had to be that of the augur. Now, augurs were not laborers or servants. They were respected, even revered. Their job? To interpret omens by observing the behavior of birds. Yes, birds. They'd stand in public forums, gaze up at the sky, and declare, "The crows have flown west. It is a good day to harvest figs." Or, "The sparrows are restless. Cancel the Senate meeting." Imagine holding that kind of power, all based on the twitch of a pigeon. But, of course, not every augur agreed with every pigeon. So disagreements happened. Heated, feathery debates. One might say Rome was ruled by the birds, and those who watched them closely. Now you might be wondering, were these jobs really all that bad? Well, perhaps. But in their own way, each one held meaning, purpose. The fullers cleaned clothes. The ornatrix made people feel beautiful. The sweepers kept the city walkable. The aqueduct divers ensured water flowed. And the augurs, well, they gave the people a sense of mystery and guidance. And isn't that what we all want? A little purpose, even if it smells like fermented socks. So, as you lay there now, your head resting softly on your pillow, take comfort in knowing that at least you don't have to carry buckets of urine down cobbled streets at dawn, or interpret seagull side eyes for your boss. You have earned your rest, modern wanderer. And now, as the sun begins to rise over the Tiber, let's leave the olive-scented air of Rome behind and gently drift to the next odd corner of the past. Come closer now, my weary companion. Let the soft hush of night cradle you as we step gently into another shadowy corner of the past. The fire crackles low. The wind rustles through the thatch above, and the world begins to settle. Tonight, we'll tiptoe into a time where midnight wasn't just a number on a glowing screen. It was the darkest part of the night, truly black and truly quiet, except when a tummy rumbled. Yes, even in the Middle Ages, people got hungry in the middle of the night. Now, let me set the scene. It's somewhere in the 1300s. You are curled under a rough woolen blanket, inside a timber-framed cottage. The walls are thin, the floor is made of packed earth, and the air smells faintly of old onions and damp straw. A single candle flickers on the table, your only light. And then, a sensation, a gentle growl, a whisper from your belly. You're hungry. But here's the thing. There is no refrigerator humming in the kitchen, no pantry of prepackaged treats, no microwave to summon a burrito from frozen slumber. If you want a snack, you'll need to be clever or desperate. First, you rise slowly, carefully. The wooden beams above are low, and you've hit your head one too many times. You shuffle past your sleeping siblings, all 5 of them, who are curled up like cats on the same straw mattress. You step over Goose. No one really knows how the goose got in. He just lives here now. And now you approach the hearth. It's still warm from the day's cooking. That's good. You can use that. You peel back a cloth from the shelf. There. A miracle. A small hunk of rye bread, slightly stale, but still edible. You sniff it. A little sour. Possibly alive. But you're not picky. There's also a pot, half covered, containing what might be cabbage stew. It is congealed into something that resembles a tired jellyfish. You poke it with a stick. It jiggles. You warm it near the fire anyway. This is your midnight snack. You dip the bread into the lukewarm stew, chew slowly, and stare into the fire. It's quiet. The only sound is the soft hiss of steam and the occasional snort from the family pig sleeping by the door. And it's in this moment right here, while sitting half awake by firelight with your bread and cabbage jelly, that you feel truly medieval. But let's not forget, not everyone ate like this. If you lived in a manor house or even a castle, things were a little different. Now imagine yourself wearing a thick linen nightshirt, walking barefoot down cold stone corridors. The torches have burned out. It's pitch black. You're feeling peckish, and the cook is asleep in her quarters. Still, you know where she hides the good stuff. You sneak into the buttery, a cool stone-walled storage room, and reach for a slab of cheese. Hard as a rock, but flavorful. You slice it with a knife the size of your forearm. Next, some dried pears, maybe a bit of salted pork too. You chew in silence, listening for rats or ghosts. It's the Middle Ages after all. Everything is either damp, haunted, or both. Now, if you were a monk in a monastery, your late-night cravings would be more restrained. Monks had rules. Hours for eating, hours for praying, hours for silence. But that didn't mean they didn't nibble now and then. In secret, of course. You might find a monk hunched over a piece of black bread, dipping it into weak ale, whispering apologies to Saint Benedict for the indulgence. Nearby, a candle sputters. The air smells of ink and parchment and 1,000 silent regrets. But what did people even crave at night back then? Well, sweet things were rare. Sugar was expensive, a luxury for the very rich. Honey was the more common treat. Imagine spreading a thin smear of honey onto a hunk of oatcake, chewing slowly, the sweetness blooming on your tongue like a summer flower in the middle of a cold, damp winter. Other treats included dried fruit, roasted nuts, and small hand pies, if you were lucky. Peasants might bake them in batches and hide a few for special moments. A bit of mushroom, maybe some leeks, tucked inside pastry that could also double as a roofing material. And for those who lived near the woods, there were roasted chestnuts, crackling, warm, with a scent that wrapped around you like a hug from the trees. Sometimes, a villager might slip outside with a small pouch, toss a few into the coals, and wait. The reward? A warm bite that tasted of earth and comfort. Of course, water wasn't always safe to drink, so many people turned to ale, a weak kind, barely alcoholic, often warm and vaguely bready. Others sipped herbal infusions, mixtures of dried flowers and leaves steeped in water, believed to soothe the belly or calm the mind. Chamomile, lavender, sometimes mint. The teas were bitter, but soothing, especially when sipped while wrapped in a blanket, sitting on a stool, watching embers blink sleepily in the fireplace. And then there were the superstitions. Eating at night, some believed, would invite spirits. Or worse, indigestion. So many people avoided it altogether. Others left offerings near doorways, crusts of bread, drops of milk, in case a wandering spirit or fairy stopped by. You didn't want to offend the unseen guests. There are even records of certain townspeople leaving treats for house brownies. Not the chocolate kind, mind you, but tiny magical beings thought to help with chores. If they were pleased, your floors were swept. If not, your cheese went missing. Midnight snacks were a gamble. But even in this time of stone walls and flickering candles, one thing remained the same: the comfort of food when the world is still. That familiar feeling of chewing in silence, of warming your hands by the hearth, of stealing a moment just for yourself. So now, as your own modern world fades around you, as your pillow cradles your head and your breath begins to slow, think of that small cottage, that clump of rye bread, that bubbling pot of old stew, and know that even centuries ago, someone else stayed up late, just like you, hungry, tired, and a little curious about what might still be in the pot. And now, as the candle burns low and the stew grows cold, let's wander onward through time's quiet corridors to another strange and sleepy world. Hush now. Let the stillness wrap around you like a woolen shawl. You've traveled far already tonight, through ancient cities, moonlit kitchens, and into the dreams of the long gone. But there's still time, still space, for one more peculiar turn down history's crooked lane. Tonight, we'll open a creaky old chest tucked away in the attic of time and peek inside at a curious collection of things that once seemed brilliant, even revolutionary, but never quite made it. Strange inventions. Some were clever, some were hopeful, and some, well, were held together with string, spit, and just a little too much confidence. Let's begin with something rather odd from the Renaissance: the floating coat. Yes, a coat, designed to help you float. It was the 1570s, and a man named Sir Hugh Platt, a fellow fond of grand ideas and even grander claims, wrote about a marvelous garment made of cork and oiled cloth that could keep a man buoyant in the Thames. Just slip it on, wade into the river, and let your jacket do the work. The only problem? It wasn't terribly fashionable, or reliable, or particularly waterproof. In fact, most wearers sank like stylishly dressed stones. Still, Sir Hugh believed, with enough cork, anything was possible. And perhaps he was right, just not in that coat. But long before floating fashion came onto the scene, another medieval mind brought forth the idea of the alarm candle. You see, before clocks became a household item, people had to get creative with timekeeping. So imagine a candle, tall, sturdy, with nails embedded at intervals along its waxy length. As it burned, each nail would drop with a little clink into a tin tray below. 1 hour gone, another clink, 2 hours passed. And if you were clever and a little tired, you could position a nail just before dawn and let it wake you with a tiny metallic thud. Gentle, smoky, possibly flammable, but charming. Now, not every invention was made for practical use. Some were born purely of dreams, like the battle umbrella of 18th century France. Yes, you heard me right. It was a weapon, disguised as weather gear. The handle concealed a blade, the tip a dart shooter, and the canopy, reinforced with thin iron ribs, supposedly strong enough to block arrows. The idea was that a gentleman could defend his honor in the rain without ever unsheathing a proper sword. Unfortunately, most found it too fiddly, and those who tried it often ended up poking themselves before the enemy got the chance. Dueling with an umbrella, a noble way to bruise your own ego. Moving along, we come to a quieter invention, the bed warming pan. Popular across cold European winters, this was a shallow metal pan filled with hot coals, slid between the bed sheets just before bedtime. A delightful concept, until the occasional coal tumbled loose and turned bedtime into a rather more dramatic event. Entire villages had tales of near misses. One man even claimed his eyebrows never grew back after a particularly spirited warming session. But perhaps no invention is stranger or cozier than the ear trumpet hat. Designed for the hard of hearing, this 19th century marvel was a top hat with a built-in horn. The wearer could tilt their head just so and funnel conversation straight into the side of their skull. Effective? Occasionally? Stylish? Certainly not. One gentleman wrote in his diary, "I can now hear my wife at supper, though I sometimes pretend otherwise, for peace's sake." Let's not forget the mechanical leech. In the days when bloodletting was considered a cure-all, doctors often used live leeches. But for those who found the little wigglers a bit too lively, inventors came up with a clockwork version, a tiny metal creature with gears and springs and a little suction cup on its belly. It ticked and hummed and latched onto your arm, drawing out, well, not much at all, really. It mostly pinched, but it did so in a very dignified way. Then there was the portable soup brick. Before bouillon cubes, there were, well, these blocks of dehydrated soup carried by travelers and soldiers alike. You drop it into hot water and stir, hoping for something resembling nourishment. But many describe the taste as beef adjacent or somewhere between stew and shoe. Still, they were convenient. Soldiers kept them in their boots. Sailors packed them in trunks. One woman reportedly used hers as a paperweight for 20 years before discovering it was edible. Now, a true favorite of mine, the pigeon message vest. In wartime, homing pigeons were used to carry messages, but one inventor thought they deserved more dignity, so he designed tiny vests, complete with miniature pockets, to keep their scrolls dry and stylish. They looked dashing, soaring through the sky like feathery little postmen. Unfortunately, the vests added weight, and some pigeons simply refused to fly, preferring to strut dramatically instead. You can almost picture a general shouting, "Where is my dispatch?" while a pigeon paces the courtyard, showing off his new outfit. And lastly, we must speak of the nap mask. Created in the early 20th century, this was a full-face contraption made of velvet and lace, designed to block out light and cradle the face during midday naps. It tied behind the head like a bonnet and puffed up gently around the cheeks. Ladies used it to preserve their complexions. Gentlemen used it, mostly in secret. One newspaper called it the most soothing suffocation known to man. Strange? Yes, but here's the quiet truth, whispered between all these curious objects. People across centuries have always wanted the same things: to float safely, to wake gently, to stay warm, to hear better, to rest. Each odd invention, every misfired contraption and beautifully flawed idea was a small act of hope. A little spark in the dark, trying to make life softer, easier, cozier. So now, as you lie wrapped in your own warm blanket, perhaps with the hum of something gentle nearby, think of the man who dreamed of a floating jacket, or the woman who wore a velvet nap mask to keep her dreams delicate. You are not so different. We're all just people, a little sleepy, a little strange. And now, as the last gear clicks inside a forgotten mechanical leech, and the pigeon finally takes flight under a moonlit sky, Let's drift once more into the next dusty dream. Come with me now, quietly, softly, as we slip past the stone gates and through the flickering torchlight of another world. Tonight, we'll tiptoe into the great stone corridors of a medieval castle. Not the kind polished and perfumed by fairy tales, but the real kind. Drafty, diamond soys, and just a little damp. Let me tell you what bedtime was really like, when you lived behind walls thick enough to keep out arrows, but not the cold. It begins, of course, with the sound of the bells, not alarm clocks, not chirping phones, but the slow, echoing clang of the vesper bell, calling all within the castle to wind down. The sun has slipped behind the hills. The servants have cleared the trenchers. The fire in the great hall burns low, flickering like tired eyes. You're in your chamber now. Not a grand one unless you're nobility. Most likely, you're a servant, or perhaps a scribe, or a knight with sore knees and a bad back from years of saddle and sword. Your room is simple. A wooden frame bed, stuffed with straw or hay, topped with a wool-stuffed mattress. The sheets, if you're lucky, are linen. If not, rough wool. And if you're really unlucky, you're just rolling yourself up in a spare cloak on a bench. The air smells of wood smoke, maybe old tallow candles, and something faintly musky like stone and sweat. It's the scent of the castle breathing in its sleep. You sit on the edge of the bed, pulling off boots still caked with yesterday's mud. They're stiff, and your fingers ache. Beside you, a small bowl of water sits on a three-legged stool. That's your wash. Splash it on your face. Swish it over your hands. No soap, just chill, metallic water. As refreshing as it is unkind. Now, the nightshirt, it's not glamorous. A long tunic, sometimes made of old flour sacks if you're thrifty. Slipping into it, you hear the distant whisper of rats scuttling along the rafters above. The cat, stationed faithfully at the foot of the bed, twitches but does not stir. And then comes the lighting. If you're high enough in rank, a servant may enter, curtsy or bow, and begin snuffing out candles, one by one, with a small iron cone. If not, you do it yourself, pinching wicks until the room grows dim and golden. A single rushlight, maybe two, remains burning. Then, the bed. Now let's be honest. It's not fluffy. The mattress is lumpy. The straw shifts when you move. The wooden frame creaks louder than you'd like. But you lie down anyway, wrapping yourself tightly in a blanket thick enough to double as armor. You tuck your feet in, far in, because you know the cold crawls up from the stone floor like a creeping fog, and because sometimes, only sometimes, something does scurry across the footboard in the dark. If you're the lord or lady of the castle, things are slightly better. You might have a canopy bed, its curtains drawn to keep in warmth. The sheets are finer. The fire in the hearth crackles. You lie beneath fur pelts, bear, fox, or something even more exotic, traded in from far lands. But no matter your rank, one thing is the same. The silence of the night is thick, deep, alive. There are no humming refrigerators, no blinking clocks, no cars whispering by outside, just wind, maybe a distant owl, the faintest rustle of someone turning in the chamber next door. And yet, you are not alone, because in most castles, sleep was communal. Entire families, even servants might sleep in the same room. Children curled against each other, footmen on mats, maids in corners, everyone huddled together for warmth, safety, and stories. Stories were part of bedtime. Someone might whisper a tale about St. George and the dragon, or a ghost said to haunt the West Tower, or a cook's apprentice who stole a ham and turned into a pig. The stories drifted like mist through the rafters, mingling with snores, prayers, and the soft shifting of hay under blankets. And if you were of the nobility, maybe, just maybe, you had a bard or minstrel nearby, someone to pluck softly at a lute and sing lullabies of old battles, lost loves, or faraway lands where the sun always shone. As you lie still, letting sleep rise over you like a gentle tide, there's one last tradition: the night prayer. Even the tiredest servant mumbled something like, "God keep me through the night and deliver me from dreams that bite." Or some equally strange local version. The words didn't matter. The rhythm did, a familiar shape at the edge of sleep. And as your eyes close, you feel the weight of the castle pressing in, not heavy, but solid, protective. These walls have stood for centuries. Let them hold you, too. Outside, the watchmen walk the walls, wrapped in cloaks, carrying torches that flicker like sleepy stars. Inside, you breathe, slowly, evenly. And maybe, just maybe, you dream of nothing at all. And now, as the castle breathes its ancient breath, as the cold stones sigh and the fire in the hearth becomes just ash and ember, let's drift again to another place, another strange and quiet moment in time. Let's turn the page again, softly, slowly, as if we're peeling back the blankets of history. You've been resting in the quiet corners of the past, among old castles, strange inventions, and smoky hearths. But tonight, let's do something a little different. Let's drift into bedrooms and barns, chambers and cottages, and explore the odd, delightful, and sometimes downright baffling ways people tried to fall asleep long ago. Because here's the secret: no matter the century, the continent, or the class, people have always struggled to fall asleep. And oh, the things they tried. Let's begin with the ancient Egyptians. Now, these sun-loving souls knew the value of rest. In their desert homes, cooled by breezes and moonlight, they'd smear crushed poppy seeds with honey onto bits of bread, chewing it slowly like a bedtime treat. Poppy, of course, is a cousin to the opium plant. Effective? Yes. Safe? Well, let's just say it worked a little too well. But if you were wealthy, you might ask your servant to fan you gently with palm fronds while another anointed your feet with scented oil, lavender, frankincense, or more questionably, fermented fish paste, believed by some to cure headaches. It also cured conversations. And what about the Greeks? Ah, yes, philosophers by day, insomniacs by night. They believed in balance. A warm bath before bed, followed by diluted wine and perhaps a light snack. Figs, olives, maybe some soft cheese, wrapped in grape leaves. Then a brief discussion about the nature of dreams, just to lull the brain into spirals of sleepy confusion. Some Greek households had special sleep stones, smooth pebbles kept under the mattress, believed to keep nightmares away. Whether it worked or not, well, no one could say. But it gave them something to blame if they woke up cranky. Now let us travel north to medieval Europe, where bedtime routines became a bit more creative. In many homes, people believed that evil spirits were most active at night. So to sleep peacefully, you might scatter dried herbs under your pillow, rosemary, thyme, or mugwort, all said to repel the night hag, a ghostly presence that sat on your chest and stole your dreams. And if that didn't work, you could carve protective symbols into the bed frame, or hang a dried toad from the rafters, or, my personal favorite, place your boots upside down at the foot of the bed so the spirits would be confused and accidentally walk the wrong direction. Effective? Debatable? Hilarious? Absolutely. But not all methods were magical. Some were deeply practical, like the warming brick. Before central heating, people would heat a brick or flat stone in the fire, wrap it in cloth, and tuck it at the foot of the bed. A medieval hot water bottle, if you will. It stayed warm for hours and occasionally left a scorch mark on your feet if you weren't careful. In Tudor England, there was the practice of first sleep and second sleep. Did you know that for centuries, people didn't sleep all the way through the night? They'd fall asleep after sundown, wake around midnight, stay up for an hour or two, maybe pray, write, or if they were lucky, snack, then fall back asleep again until dawn. It was so common, people thought not waking up in the night was unnatural. Even in 1685, a doctor advised that waking between first and second sleep be employed to consider your dreams, which frankly is the fastest way not to fall back asleep. Now let's peek in on the Chinese dynasties, where the art of sleep was taken quite seriously. Certain emperors believed that jade pillows, cool, hard, and carved from stone, helped balance the energy of the body. Never mind the neck pain, the qi must flow. Others burned powdered sandalwood or dried lotus petals before bed, believing the scent calmed the spirit. And many drank herbal brews, mixtures of chrysanthemum, licorice root, or fermented plum, meant to quiet the mind and settle the breath. Across the globe, in pre-Columbian South America, the Incas slept wrapped in alpaca wool beneath thatched roofs. But when rest wouldn't come, they chewed coca leaves, mild, stimulating, but sometimes paradoxically calming. A strange sleepy clarity wrapped in the fog of the Andes, and in Victorian England, where people believed everything had a medical cause, even shyness, sleeplessness was taken as a sign of moral weakness. The solution? Books. Long, long books. Dull ones. Families kept volumes of sermons, railway schedules, or technical farming manuals on the nightstand. One man reportedly said, "I read 3 pages of comparative pig breeds of Kent every night. Never made it to page 4. But nothing compares to the age-old tradition of bed sharing. Across history, most people didn't sleep alone. Whole families, and sometimes animals, shared the same bed. If someone snored, you rolled with it. If someone kicked, you kicked back. A kind of sleepy democracy. In Scottish Highlands, travelers often had to share beds with strangers at inns. It was considered rude not to make light conversation first. A little chat, a warm good morrow, and then a shared blanket. No fuss. And then there were the sounds, the world's lullabies, the hush of wind through pine, the creak of wooden walls, the clatter of hooves fading on a muddy road, the lowing of cows, the snort of pigs, the breath of someone you love slowing beside you. Even the wealthy, in their silk-lined beds, heard it all. The world does not sleep silently. It hums, it breathes, it rocks you gently. And so did these strange traditions, each one a small attempt to answer the same question. How do I drift off when the world refuses to stop spinning? So they tried, with stones under pillows, with sweet herbs and sleepy teas, with sermons and sandals and shared dreams. And now, dear traveler, you are part of that long tradition. Wrapped in your own blanket, maybe listening to this with heavy eyelids, wondering what time it is but not caring. You've done your rituals. You've arranged your pillow just so. You've wandered through the oddities of sleep across centuries. And now, as the candle guttered beside a Victorian bed, as the warming brick cooled in a medieval footboard, as the poppy bread was set aside in an Egyptian dream, let's turn the page once more and rest our minds somewhere new. Come now, just a little further. You're doing so well, drifting through the soft corridors of forgotten history. Tonight, we slip into the twilight hours of the ancient world, not to explore its wars or temples or mighty empires, but its bathtubs, or rather, its lack thereof. Let me show you how people cleaned themselves before bed, long before soap came in a bottle, or hot water flowed from a tap. Because, as it turns out, humans, even thousands of years ago, did not like going to bed sticky. Now, picture yourself in ancient Mesopotamia. The air is thick with dust and incense. The river is wide and brown, and the houses are made of mud brick, cool in the evening heat. You are a merchant, maybe, or a scribe. And after a long day of bartering or tablet scratching, your skin feels like sandpaper and your armpits hum like bees. So what do? You fetch a servant or a sibling or, if you're alone, a shallow bowl. You pour water from a clay jug over your hands, your feet, maybe even your hair. There's no real soap, just water, and maybe crushed herbs or oil to rub into your skin. You scrape off sweat with a curved metal blade called a strigil, something between a spatula and a spoon. It doesn't smell like lavender, but it works. The water runs down your arms, over sun-baked skin, and collects in the cracks of the earth floor. It's messy, but by the time you lie on your woven mat, you feel better, lighter. Now shift forward a few centuries and step into ancient Greece. Ah, yes, the land of olive oil and public baths. But not everyone used a bath, not at home. Instead, they used oil. Yes, oil. Before bed, you'd strip down, rub yourself head to toe with olive oil, thick, golden, and sticky in the summer heat. And then take your strigil and scrape it all off again. The oil lifted dirt and sweat with it. The scraping made your skin smooth. You'd wipe down with a linen cloth, maybe add a touch of myrrh, and call it a night. Clean, in a shiny kind of way. The wealthy might visit a public bathhouse, but that was more social than sanitary. A place to gossip, debate, and compare biceps. Still, the ritual of oil and scraping was a quiet one, done slowly by candlelight, like polishing a piece of wood, like shedding a day. Now let's glide to ancient Rome, where hygiene was both an obsession and a bit of a gamble. Roman bathhouses were everywhere, grand structures of steam, marble, and echo. Before bed, many Romans would visit the thermae, progressing from warm water to hot steam to cold plunges. They used pumice stones, brushes, oils, and sometimes ash or powdered herbs. But at home? Not so luxurious. Most folks did what they could with basins, towels, and the occasional borrowed slave. A quick rub down, some perfume dabbed at the throat, and a prayer to the household gods that no lice had survived the scrubbing. Roman soap, by the way, was made of animal fat and ashes, not exactly spa-scented, but effective. One poet wrote, "I scrubbed myself with the soap of Mars. Now my enemies weep when I enter the room." Or maybe they wept for other reasons. In ancient India, hygiene was tied to ritual. Water was sacred, and washing before bed wasn't just about comfort. It was about purity. People rinsed their feet, hands, and faces before entering sleeping quarters. Some chanted mantras as they did so. They used abtan, a paste made from turmeric, chickpea flour, and milk, to exfoliate. The scent lingered on the skin like sunlight clinging to silk. It wasn't just about cleaning the body. It was about preparing the soul for dreams. Across the sands in ancient Egypt, cleanliness was nearly divine. Before bed, Egyptians bathed with water drawn from the Nile or stored in cool clay pots. They used natron, a naturally occurring salt, as a scrub. It dried the skin, but left it dust-free. They shaved most of their body hair to keep cool and clean. They scented their skin with lotus oil, wore cones of perfumed wax on their heads, and changed their linen garments nightly. Even the poor tried their best, wiping themselves with damp cloths, scrubbing with sand, and rinsing with what little water they had. And in medieval times, as you know by now, things were a little less fragrant. People believed too much bathing could let sickness seep in, so instead, they wiped down. A servant might bring you a basin of warm water and a cloth. You'd wash your hands, face, and feet. Considered the exposed parts. The rest? Well, if it wasn't visible, it probably wasn't urgent. But they loved scented things. Rosewater, lavender sachets, vinegar-soaked sponges. Some even tucked herbs into their sleeves and pillows to smell better while they slept. The result? A nose full of rosemary dreams. And if you were lucky enough to live in a Japanese onsen town, your end-of-day ritual would be a bath, hot, still, and deep enough to hold all your worries. Cleanliness was a virtue. Families bathed together. The steam rose in the wooden rooms like spirits ascending. Afterward, you'd slip into a cotton robe, sip green tea, and lie on a tatami mat with skin soft as rain. Even in places where water was scarce, people found ways. In the deserts of the Middle East, oil was used to clean. In Arctic regions, they scrubbed with snow or animal fat. In the jungles of the Amazon, rivers were sacred, cleansing, cold, and alive. But no matter where they lived, people wanted to feel fresh before they lay down to dream. Even if fresh meant sand and sheep's milk. Even if it meant singing while scrubbing, or humming while wiping down with the same cloth your grandmother used. Because at the end of the day, when the world finally went quiet and the stars peeked in through cracks in the wall, everyone, everywhere just wanted to sleep without yesterday sticking to their skin. And so do you. So now, let your breath fall softly. Let your body rest. Imagine the warmth of water trickling over your shoulders, the soft scrape of a strigil, the scent of lavender or sandalwood or fresh river stones. You're clean now, inside and out. Time to sleep. And as the last drop falls from the clay bowl, as the steam fades from the candlelit chamber, let's step gently onward to a new dream waiting just around the bend. Hush. The night has deepened. The stars are quieter now, as if they too have settled into sleep. And here you are, nestled, still, and safe, ready for one more gentle step into the strangeness of the past. Tonight, we're not just wandering through time, we're wandering through belief. The curious, the comforting, and the completely bizarre ideas that people once held about sleep. Because across the centuries, sleep was never just sleep. It was a doorway, a liminal space, a place between the world of the living and something else. Let's start, perhaps, with something simple. In many ancient cultures, sleep was considered a vulnerable state. You were still, silent, unaware. Your soul, some believed, could wander off, float away, drift into the dream world, and forget to come back. So, in parts of Africa, some families tied a small string around the sleeper's toe, a gentle tether for the soul, just in case it got adventurous. In early China, it was believed that if you dreamed of falling, it wasn't just your imagination. It meant your soul had floated too high and was being snapped back into your body. That sharp jolt you feel, a celestial leash yanking you back to your own skin. Odd, perhaps, but oddly familiar too. And then there's the pillow. In medieval Europe, some believed that sleeping with your head facing north invited death. Why? Because corpses were often buried with their heads to the north. So lying that way, even for a nap, was considered an open invitation to the Grim Reaper. If someone was found sleeping in that position, they'd often be gently rotated by a family member. Just a little shuffle, no fuss. Just, let's not tempt fate tonight. In Japan, dreams were messages, not just images, but signs from the spiritual world. And bad dreams? Those were dangerous. So if you had a nightmare, you were to wake up, go outside, and whisper your dream to a tree, preferably a large one. The tree, steady and wise, would absorb the fear, and keep it. You'd go back to bed, lighter, unburdened. One poet even wrote, "Last night's horror now lives in the plum tree. Let it bloom." In parts of Eastern Europe, babies weren't allowed to sleep with their hands above their heads. It was believed that doing so invited death, or more specifically, allowed spirits to tug the child's soul right out through the fingertips. Mothers would gently tuck their infants' hands beneath little blankets, not just for warmth, but for safety from invisible hands. In Russia, it was common to make a cross on your pillow before sleep, with your finger or with chalk or with a tiny piece of thread. Not religious necessarily, just cautious. It was a small spell of protection, a way of telling the night, "Not tonight, thank you." And in Scandinavia, there was a legend of the mare, not a horse, but a shadowy being that crept into rooms at night and sat on the sleeper's chest, causing bad dreams and suffocation. It's where we get the word nightmare. To protect against it, you could sleep with an iron knife under your pillow, or place your shoes facing opposite directions at the foot of the bed to confuse the mare if she tried to find you. Or, if you were truly desperate, you could sleep in a circle of salt. A little crunchy, but effective, they said. In the American colonies, some people believed that dreaming of teeth falling out meant death was coming. Others said it simply meant someone in your family was lying. Either way, people woke up nervously checking their smiles. Superstitions even crept into the construction of beds. In Ireland, it was unlucky to have a mirror facing the bed. They said the soul, upon rising in the night, might mistake its reflection for another soul and forget which body it belonged to. So, beds were arranged carefully. Mirrors were covered at dusk, and if someone died in a room, the mirror was covered immediately to prevent their spirit from getting trapped behind the glass. In West Africa, dreams were deeply spiritual. A dream of water could mean new life. A dream of snakes, change, or danger, or a message from the ancestors. Dreams weren't just stories, they were conversations with the universe. So if you had a powerful dream, you told it to the village elder. They would interpret it gently while sipping tea made of bark and honey. You weren't just describing symbols, you were sharing pieces of your soul. Even something as simple as snoring wasn't always seen as ordinary. In parts of India, loud snoring was once believed to be a sign that evil spirits had made a home inside the body. Rattling around during sleep, echoing through the nose. The louder the snore, the more crowded the spirit party. To fix it, burning ghee lamps, incense, or in one case, rubbing garlic on the sleeper's feet. Why the feet? No one quite remembers, but it seemed to work. And then there was sleepwalking. Across cultures, a sleepwalker was not to be touched. In Germany, it was said that waking one too suddenly would trap their soul between worlds. In France, it was believed that a sleepwalker was being guided by a spirit, and interrupting the journey could cause madness. So families would quietly follow their loved one through the hallways, gently blocking them from stairs, whispering instead of shouting, waiting for them to return to bed on their own. Almost like watching someone dream out loud. Even the way people woke up was steeped in superstition. In Victorian England, it was considered bad luck to open your eyes immediately. Better to stretch, yawn, and give your soul time to fully return from the dream world. And never, ever speak before your feet touch the floor. To do so was to invite confusion into the day. So many little rituals, so many ways to make the wild mystery of sleep feel just a bit more manageable. But maybe, just maybe, they were all saying the same thing, that sleep is not just rest. It's a journey, a strange one, a sacred one, where we slip through shadows, tangle with memory, and wake slightly different than before. And now, as your own body grows heavier beneath the weight of sleep, as the superstitions of 1,000 years whisper themselves into your pillows, you are safe. You are wrapped in salt and moonlight. The mare cannot find you. The spirits are content. Your hands are tucked gently beneath your blanket, and all that's left is rest. So drift now, softly, into that dream world so many once feared. Because you, lucky, quiet traveler, know the truth. It's not so strange after all, just mysterious. And now, as the whisper fades from the old woman's tale in the candlelit cottage, let's move onward, slow as mist, into the next waiting wonder. Come closer now. No need to hurry. The world has grown hushed again, cloaked in shadow and starlight. And while you lay curled in stillness, warm and content, the past whispers of those who did not sleep, who could not sleep because someone had to stay awake. Tonight, we drift through the side doors of history, past the kings and scribes and poets, to the quiet, overlooked ones, the night workers, the watchers, the wanderers of lamplit hours, whose strange little jobs once made it easier for the rest of the world to dream. Let's begin, as we so often do, in medieval Europe. Cobblestone streets, timbered houses, a sky as dark as ink pricked with candle stars. You're just settling into your straw-stuffed bed when you hear it. Tunk, tunk, tunk. That's the sound of the night watchman. He walks the narrow lanes with a lantern in one hand and a halberd in the other, calling out the hour. Midnight has struck. All is well. Sometimes he rhymes. Sometimes he grumbles. Always he watches. His job? To keep the peace, to check for fires, to scare away thieves, and occasionally to wake the town baker who had to start kneading bread before sunrise. And though he's often alone, he's not the only one out in the dark. A few streets over there walks the knocker-up. Yes, that's really what they were called. In the 18th and 19th centuries, before alarm clocks were common, a knocker-up was hired to wake people by knocking on their windows. Not with their hand, mind you, but with a long stick. Some used pea shooters, others fishing rods. One man in Manchester used a bamboo cane taller than his own house. He'd stand in the dark, staring up at the second story, and tap, tap, tap until a sleepy face appeared. Sometimes it took a full 5 minutes of poking. Sometimes they fell back asleep. Either way, he was paid by the week and by how punctual his clients were to their shift at the mill. Strange? Yes, but rather poetic, don't you think? A sleepy soul rousing another every morning like a whisper passed along the rooftops. Then there were the lamplighters. Before electric bulbs, the streets were lit by gas lamps, tall iron posts with glass globes. Every night, just after dusk, a man with a long pole would walk the lanes and light the city, one flickering flame at a time. In the morning, he came back and snuffed them out again. Children loved him. Lovers thanked him. Cats followed him. And though his work was silent, you could trace his path in light. In Japan, the night had its own special kind of worker, the yobanashi, or night announcer. Before clocks were widespread, this man walked through the villages calling out the time, not in hours but in segments of the night. He'd recite small poems or sayings to remind people how late it was, or how long they still had to sleep. Third bell, deep night. Frost thickens on the pine. It wasn't just timekeeping, it was comfort, like a lullaby drifting down the alleys. Meanwhile, inside many homes, someone else stayed awake. In the grand houses of Victorian England, there were the nursemaids and scullery girls who cleaned quietly in the dark, washing the day's dishes and laying out the morning's breakfast. In castles and manors, the fire tenders shuffled softly from room to room, checking embers, adding logs, whispering to flames so they wouldn't go out before dawn. And in poor homes, where families all slept in one room, it was often the eldest child who stayed up a little later, stoking the hearth, warming the next day's porridge, mending socks by candlelight. Not paid, not titled, but a night worker all the same. Then far away, in desert caravans, there were the camel watchers, men who stayed up with the animals while the rest of the group slept under the stars. They sang soft songs to keep scorpions away. They brewed tea over coals the size of a walnut. They watched the horizon for shadows that didn't belong. They were guardians, quiet ones. And what of midwives? They too worked by night, always on call, always ready. In villages and cities alike, it was often under the hush of moonlight that babies decided to arrive. So the midwife rose from her bed, wrapped herself in wool, and stepped into the cold. She carried satchels of herbs, linens, and calm. She knew how to hush a scream, how to coax a breath, how to welcome a new soul into the world, while the rest of the town slept unaware. And in the cities, the bigger cities, there were the night soil men. Less glamorous, but just as necessary. Before indoor plumbing, someone had to empty the chamber pots. They did it after sundown, hauling buckets down the alleys, whistling softly to avoid startling anyone. Their wagons creaked, their boots squelched. They worked in silence, beneath 1,000 closed shutters. People never thanked them, but they should have. And let's not forget the night fishermen, men who pushed boats out into the dark sea, casting nets by starlight, or the bakers, already elbow-deep in dough while most were still dreaming. The world, it turns out, never really slept. It just shifted. Some rested, some worked, a great wheel turning, slow, steady, unseen. So tonight, as you lie warm and drowsy, perhaps imagine yourself among them, a lantern in your hand, a wool scarf wrapped tight, the hush of cobbles under your boots. Maybe you're a lamplighter, or a knocker-up, or the soft voice calling out poetry beneath a slivered moon. Not heroic, not flashy, just useful. And when your shift ends, just as the sun tickles the horizon, you slip quietly into your own bed. The day begins, but for you, it's finally time to dream. And now, as the last gas lamp flickers out and the fire tender lays down their iron poker, let us drift once again, forward, backward, sideways through the pages of time, into one last cozy sliver of forgotten life. Settle in now. One last time. Let the blankets hug your shoulders. Let your breath come soft and easy. Because tonight, in this final chapter, we visit the peculiar, puzzling, and sometimes downright bizarre places where humans have laid their heads and closed their eyes. Because not all beds were soft, not all bedrooms had doors, and not every pillow was, well, pillow-shaped. Let's begin in a place far from feather beds and quilted comforters. Let's begin in a Mongolian yurt, a round felt-wrapped tent that circles like the sky. Inside, the air is warm with the scent of milk tea and wood smoke. The hearth sits in the center. The family sleeps around it, heads inward, feet outward, to share warmth and dreams alike. Everyone has a place. Even the family goat sometimes sneaks in for a nap. The beds, thin mats, rolled and tucked away each morning. There's no clutter, just the creak of the wooden frame, the flicker of firelight on the curved walls, and the deep, dreamless sleep of people who live close to the stars. Now come with me to a Viking longhouse where whole families, and sometimes multiple families, slept side by side. Along the walls were raised platforms, stuffed with straw and covered in animal pelts. Dogs slept near the feet. Children snuggled near their mothers. Everyone else layered up and pretended not to mind the occasional elbow. Privacy? Not really, but warmth? Absolutely. In the winter, the smoke from the fire would rise into the thatch and slowly leak out, leaving the air thick but toasty. Vikings didn't have pillows, but they did have sacks of wool or even folded tunics to rest their heads. Now imagine you're visiting Renaissance Italy, stepping into a wealthy merchant's home. You might expect a luxurious bed, yes? Well, sort of. The bed was often the most expensive item in the house. Grand, carved, and taller than your shoulder. But here's the strange part. People didn't lie flat. They slept propped up, almost sitting. Why? Many believed that lying flat invited death, the same position as a corpse. Upright sleep on a mountain of pillows was considered safer, more civilized. So they leaned back at an angle like reclining royalty, heads resting on stiff embroidered cushions, necks slightly sore by morning. And then there were the Chinese wooden headrests. Yes, headrests, not pillows. Carved from wood or stone, sometimes jade, these pillows were designed to cool the head, align the spine, and prevent dreams from becoming too wild. Some were flat planks, others had curves, none were soft, but they believed it helped preserve energy, kept one's chi in balance. Softness, it seems, was not the goal. In ancient Egypt, the pillow was not only wooden, but often carved into the shape of a half-moon cradle meant to support the neck. It lifted the head so wigs, yes, wigs, wouldn't get flattened overnight. And in tombs, these headrests were often buried with their owners, so the soul would have somewhere familiar to rest. Now step into a Siberian hut, deep in the cold north. The bed is not just a bed, it's a platform above a stove. Yes, the family sleeps above the source of heat. In small rooms, these stoves keep the whole house warm. Blankets are heavy, air is thick, the air outside might be -30. But up here, wrapped in furs and each other, it's a warm cocoon of breath and comfort. In the morning, they rise slowly, blinking like marmots. Let's peek now into a Japanese ryokan, a traditional inn. The floors are tatami, straw mats, springy and firm. The futon is stored during the day, folded and aired out. At night, it's rolled out neatly, topped with a thin duvet. No bed frame, no fluff. Just the quiet simplicity of ground-level sleep. There is something grounding about it, quite literally. And then there were floating beds. Yes. In coastal Southeast Asia, some people slept in hammocks, tied above the waterline, gently swaying with the tide. The breeze kept the bugs away. The sound of the waves rocked them to sleep. Even today, hammocks are still popular in these regions, a legacy of rest that moves with the rhythm of the sea. In medieval Europe, peasants often slept on piles of straw in a corner of the house. No beds at all, just a straw tick or stuffed sack spread on the ground. If they had animals, the warmth was shared. If they had lice, it was also shared. They didn't call it going to bed. They called it going to the straw. Romantic? Not exactly, but effective. And you couldn't fall off. And then there were the box beds of rural France and the Netherlands. Imagine a cabinet, a large wooden cupboard, with a mattress inside. That was your bed. You climbed in, shut the little door, and disappeared into a cozy wooden cube. It was warm, it was private, and it was strangely charming. Guests slept upright in chairs. Children slept 3 to a pallet. But you, if you were lucky, got the box. Even stranger in colonial America, it was common to share beds with travelers. Inns had few rooms, and you'd be told to double up. Sometimes with a friend, sometimes with a stranger. Polite conversation was expected. So was not snoring. Now picture a Bedouin tent, spread wide beneath a desert sky. Here beds were mats on the sand, woven by hand, with soft goat hair blankets. The stars served as a ceiling. Stories were told until the fire dimmed. Children listened with one ear open, hoping the tale would end before their eyes did. And in Inca homes, beds were sometimes woven platforms suspended from the walls, an early hammock of sorts. The air was thin in the Andes, but the blankets were thick, the bodies close, the dreams full of mountains. So many kinds of beds, so many ways to sleep. And in each one, someone once lay down after a long day and sighed with relief, closed their eyes, let the world disappear. Because comfort, it turns out, doesn't always look like a mattress and a pillow top cover. Sometimes it's a straw tick in a warm hut. Sometimes it's a hammock over the river. Sometimes it's a carved wooden headrest under a full moon. And sometimes it's just a voice like this one, reminding you that you are safe. You are warm. And you are part of something timeless. People have always slept in stone huts, on woven mats, beneath yurts, thatched roofs, and painted ceilings. Sleep has always waited, always welcomed. And now, it welcomes you too. So rest, dear traveler. You've wandered far. Let your head sink softly. Let the strangeness of history settle like dust. And as the last door closes on this quiet, curious house of dreams, let's say good night. Thank you for wandering through time with me, through dreams and dust, straw and stars, oil lamps and lullabies. If you drifted off somewhere along the way, let me know in the comments when you wake up. This has been Boring History for Sleep. Until next time, sweet dreams.